Where's Miss Cass? I'm glad you asked. Hey, everybody, it's your girl, Miss Cass, principal broker of the Aspire Group, powered by Exit Strategy Realty, your neighborhood realtor, investor, and educator, heavy on that education, connecting you to the community through real estate. As promised, every Wednesday for Fair Housing Month, I am highlighting the voices of people that are near and dear to my community. And I wanted to take a moment to really sit down with someone that I didn't even know that this person was a pioneer when it comes to fair housing, but truly a pioneer. And I am talking about none other than Mr. William Phillips, who is the father of my good friend and attorney, Shara Kamal. Oh my God. Thank you both for joining me today. How are you both doing?
Good,
That's
good.
great.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
Listen, I know we've tried so hard to get on each other's schedules. Again, I said this off camera, I'm saying it on camera. Thank you, thank you, thank you to you both for your flexibility. I feel like this story should be told as we are entering the last couple of weeks of fair housing. I'm going to be quiet and I am really going to give the floor to you, Mr. Phillips, so that you can tell us how fair housing affected you and your family on a personal scale.
Okay. Well, we started back in 1971 when I started my business. And then in 1973, I bought my first house in Homewood with the intention of staying there just 5 years and get a larger home. So that was my approach. We bought the house in 73, moved to Homewood. Then after 5 years, we started looking for a larger place. We looked in all the southern suburbs, couldn't find anything that we liked. And my insurance agent, who's a personal friend of mine, office had just moved to Oak Brook. So he had met relatives in Oak Brook and he informed me that they were building new houses in Oak Brook. So I followed up on those leads, met with the realtors, and we looked at many homes in Oak Brook. Then we got to this new development where they were building all new homes. And I thought the houses were a little high. I didn't only want to spend about $500,000 for a home, and we couldn't find anything that I liked in that price range. So they showed me a larger house, and I fell in love with that home right away. And tried to negotiate the builder down. Did get him down some. We entered a contract. It's a private development, so you understand. It's a private development, gated development. So they have a homeowners association, and we entered a contract for $675,000, and I got my financing and everything in place. Once the contract accepted my contract, I put my house in Homewood on the market, sold it right away, sold it within like a week or two,
That's
and
still happening, by the way.
pardon me?
She said that's
Homewood
happening.
is still a hot spot.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
fighting. We're fighting for contracts over there. So
Didn't take long at all. This guy came from Philadelphia, and he
wow.
bought the house. I mean, right away. And I'm waiting. I have a closing date for the Oak Brook house, and like a week before the closing date, I received a letter from the homeowners association saying that they were sorry. They wanted to apologize to me. They were sorry that I would not be able to buy this house. That they're going to buy it. The homeowners association is going to buy the house. So I mean, I was just floored. We've had about 2 months to go by. No one contacted me and said they were going to exercise their right of first refusal. So anyway, I went to a lawyer in Homewood, and he suggested, well, I'll call this federal attorney that handles this kind of stuff. He said, I don't deal with it, but there's a federal attorney that I know that handles these type of cases. His name was William Caruso. So I called Bill Caruso, who turned out to be one of Shara's teachers in law school.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. So I called and meet with Caruso, and he said, "Yeah, this is a lot of this is going on, talking about housing discrimination." He said, "We just have to really dig in on this." So we met many times. We met, and he got all kind of information because he didn't know me. And I had to give him my history, and he asked all kind of questions and everything, things that I never thought I'd have to go through to buy a
Wow.
house.
Wow.
And anyway, he takes the case, he files it, and we end up in court. We get Judge Prentice Marshall, who said he was familiar with what goes on out here in the western suburbs as well. So we get to court, and these people, they run their witnesses and everything down there. They even, in the trial, when we were in court, they accused me of being a Southside drug dealer. Now, they don't know me, never seen me before in my life. And they threw that out there that I was probably a Southside drug dealer. That's the only way I could afford this house. Prentice Marshall made them pay for that. But once that kind of stuff is put out there, is you can't take it back. You know, people
Can't take it back.
that's right. People read about it in the paper. Oh, he's a Southside drug dealer. You know, I've never done drugs in my life, but
Wow.
it gets out there in the atmosphere. So anyway, uh, we have the trial, and they march all of these people down there, and they testify, and then our people testify to what we've gone through, and we end up winning the case. And it was a landmark case at that time. Never
Yes.
had a housing
Yeah.
discrimination case
Mhm.
that's of that magnitude in the history of the country, really. So it went viral. Everybody, they were calling from Korea, they were calling from all overseas, black people reading about it, and they were
Yeah.
calling my office and everything. So anyway, we got this judgment against them for the full amount, plus attorney's fee. And Caruso hired what they call a collector lawyer, a lawyer that goes specializes in collecting judgments.
Wow.
So he went out to their house on New Year's Eve, and he went there with liens, and he put liens on all the people's doors, all the homeowners' doors. And
Wow.
that next business day, my phone at the office was jumping off the hook, and they wanted to settle. They wanted to settle right there. Right, they wanted to bring me a check. I had banks. Banks was calling my house. Banks that had mortgages for those people. They were all calling my office, wanted to know, was I going to put a lien on their properties and all that. But anyway, the collecting lawyer was able to get that money, and that was pretty much the case. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, wow, like we talked a little bit about this off camera. When you talk about Homewood, my family's lived in Homewood. My sister, to be specific, has lived in Homewood for the last, I want to say 15 years, 20 years.
Okay.
So all of these communities that you're talking about are near and dear to my heart. Like I've touched these communities. I've done business in these communities. I've helped homeowners, right? In these same communities. So this landmark case that you all experienced, this is like, it takes my breath away. I don't know why I'm just hearing about it. I feel like this is a case that should be taught in our public school system. This is something that we should be talking about within our communities. Homewood, again, my sister stays there. Oak Brook, I worked at Redbox. That was my former life. But I worked in Oak Brook Tower, and I was just saying how I love the community. It's so, everything is like right there. You have your healthcare, you have your shopping, you have your entertainment, you're by the expressway. I mean, everything is there. It's really a great community. But going back to the time that you had to fight to get into that community, what were some of your feelings as you were going through this fight? You being accused of being a drug dealer, although you're a very successful businessman, right?
Correct. Now, one thing you have to understand, my mind at the time, I've never ever thought that I would be limited to anything. If you want it, you work hard, you should be able to get it. That was
Yes.
my mindset, and it still is. I just never imagined anyone stepping in like they did to deny me from having something that I had worked for and was entitled to. So even today, when the way I live my life, I just don't expect to be denied anything. If I want it and can afford it, I should be able to get it. So that
Okay.
was my mindset at all time. Now, there were repercussions behind this. We won the lawsuit, and the IRS stepped in, okay? And it became a nightmare. So I spent from the 80s to 97 fighting the IRS to 1997 before I was able to clear that up. They came in with all kind of false allocations. They said I owed them $2 million in back taxes. I mean, it became a real nightmare. So I spent the next 3 years after I won the lawsuit, I spent the next 3 years trying to prove that I didn't owe the $2 million. So lawyers, accountant, every nickel I make, I was pretty much paying to the lawyers and accountants. So eventually, after 3 years, I realized that this is not just going to go away. I thought sooner or later they'd realize I don't owe this money and it would just go away. So after 3 years, I'm paying all this money to lawyers and accountants, and I realized it's not going to go away. So I decided to take matters in my own hand. So I decided to do it my way. And I met a friend that worked for the state of Illinois Internal Revenue Department, and he introduced me to a gentleman that was retiring from the IRS, starting his own business. His name was DeWitt Harley, and he lived in Flossmoor. And he took my case. That was in 92 by the time I met him. And from 92 to 97, we were able to resolve the matter. And I still paid, because of DeWitt advice, I paid him $970,000 with the promise that I would get more than half of it back. And that did happen. I paid him in August of 97. And the next year I filed my taxes, I got back about $600,000 of the 970, which I didn't owe them any money, but I got back 600,000 of the 970.
Wow. And this was just like, so I'll tell my age. I like to believe that I'm 45, but I'm 45 years old. I was born in 78. So I was literally learning how to walk, how to talk. And here you are fighting for justice, right? Fighting for your family. Attorney Kamal, what did you experience as a child? Because it sounds like your dad was definitely no nonsense. So what did you experience, and how has that helped to really spark your love for what you do? I'm sure that has something to do with your career.
Absolutely. I mean, just having the understanding that, you work hard, for what you want, right? You go after what you want. We are right now, the house is in Burr Ridge, but we moved from the south side of Chicago, not far from one of the businesses, which was on 87th Street, Quality Car Wash. So I had, I think, a wonderful experience in being kind of rooted in the community, right? And then moving to the suburbs and being able to, have the best of, two beautiful worlds, right? And have a foundation of, great parents who, instilled in me the power of working for yourself, working hard, and being able to take that and make good for your community, do good and represent well. So it was fitting that I would go to law school, of course, and be introduced to Professor Caruso, as I would call him, and later interned with the Fair Housing Legal Clinic and got to understand firsthand the experiences of the people who would come in and tell their stories. We'd interview them and prepare them for intake, and everyone had a heartbreaking story about their experience with, working hard to buy a home, looking to move in with a disability and being denied, having a certain type of income that comes from, a questionable source and being denied because of the source of income. All of those things came up on a repeated basis while I was interning, and I had the opportunity to make the connection. And of course, when Mr. Caruso found out who I was, and here we're learning in the classroom about this case, and I'm letting him know, like, do you know, right? Oh, do you know? And he was just floored. And it took me kind of under his wing in the clinic to really have me work side by side with him and Professor Powell, who was another lead staff attorney in the clinic. But that was the, kind of the ground for me in terms of practicing law. And as a real estate attorney coming up, with these transactions that have associations tied to them, and having to go through this process with every transaction that has an association with a first right of refusal. Oftentimes buyers just don't understand what that means, right? They have the right to refuse you, right, on whatever basis they choose.
Yes.
And it's only because of the Fair Housing Act that we have some protections, but that act does not really protect you if you don't know what your rights are, right? You will let it fly and move on to the next home if you're not willing to fight and understand what your rights are. So that's the importance of having good counsel who understands these types of laws, understands the experience of my dad and others who have gone through it and have fought for our right to be able to buy where we want.
Yes.
Right? When you've worked it, it doesn't just come up with associations who have the first right of refusal. It comes up in lending too.
Yes, it does.
You work hard to be able to apply for a mortgage to buy wherever you want to. And some lender says, oh, because you're in this particular zip code, we're not going to do it. Too much of a risk. Now it's your choice, right? You put the offer on the home. You've decided you want to buy here and you can afford it. You can afford it and show with your bank statements, tax returns, all of that, money in the bank. But you have a lender who refuses to lend because of discrimination, right? It only boils down to that. So it's important that you continue to highlight this, and other realtors continue to educate buyers about the importance of, if you want it, right, and you can have it, right, but you do have to understand all of that's happening in the background.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much.
Thing too, the financial end of it. The house I bought in Homewood, I paid $65,000 for that house. I sold it for $120,000 in about 6 years. The house that I bought in Oak Brook, I paid $675,000 for that house. Because of all of my financial problems, I sold it for $1.2 million. But the people that I sold it to, now I sold a house in 85. I sold it in 85. The people bought it in 85. They sold it for $3 million. That was supposed to be my money. They sold it for $3 million in 1990, just 5 years later. They paid me $175,000. I mean, $1.2 million for the house. They paid me $1.2 million. They sold it for $3 million 5 years later. That was my money.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm so glad that you talked about that, because as Attorney Kamal was highlighting some of the tactics that have been used, right, to keep us from gaining generational wealth. Today, we are still struggling with the redlining through appraisals, not adequately valuating our properties. There have been cases. Long Island had a landmark case about how appraisers had not properly appraised the property. I had a young lady here in Chicago. I interviewed her a couple of years ago, actually during COVID. She jumped on a Zoom with me to talk about her experience. She won a case with through HUD because her property had not been appraised properly. I believe she had gotten appraised for maybe $200,000 less than what her property should have been appraised for. So what she did was she actually got another appraisal, waited that time out, because we know that these appraisals, they stick to the property depending on what type of appraisal they are. So she waited out that time. She had to depersonalize her space, take down all of her identification items, no photos, nothing that would give the appraiser the idea that this was a Black household, and had her neighbor sit the appraisal, who was not African American, a Caucasian person. They were able to sit the appraisal. Boom, appraisal comes back $250,000 more than what it was previously appraised for. So we're still fighting today.
No doubt. Another case out where we are now, we're in Burridge. Well, in this same development that we're in right now, a white guy built a house in here the same time we built. We built this house from the ground up.
Wow.
And he built the house and put it on the market about 2 years after he was in it. And my wife and I were driving by, so we took the number off and called. Said, what are you asking for this house? He was selling it himself. He said he was asking $3.5 million. Well, $3.5 million, no one in here spent $3.5 million on a house. So we thought the guy got to be crazy. Okay. He sat on the house for $3.5 million. Nothing in here appraised anywhere near $3.5 million. He sold the house for $3.5 million. Yeah. To an athlete, to a basketball player.
Wow.
He's still in the house right now. And the most he could have had in that house was $1.5 million, $1.8 million maybe, max.
Yes.
So $3.5 million in
Which
less
is,
than 5 years.
which is going to help feed his family honestly, for generations to come. He's going to be able to take his children and go through the best schools. They're going to be able to experience the world. They're going to be able to invest in other properties and other real estate investments.
Away with that. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate that we are still today, it's 2024, and here we are fighting to get our homes and our communities evaluated in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're having people come from outside of our communities to appraise our properties. They don't know the gems that are within our communities. They can't put a value to the things that we appreciate. And so that's one of the things that I know we've been working on. The real estate industry is working on. We've highlighted it several times. There is now a national discussion that's being had about appraisers and just how appraisals are happening within our communities and how we're having to basically depersonalize, de-African Americanize our spaces. I've just made a word, but really we have to hide ourselves within our homes in order for some of these appraisals to even be done accurately. So what would you all say to me? I'm a real estate broker. Obviously, Attorney Kamal and I have done business together. We've done educational workshops together. Every time we do an educational workshop, people give us feedback like, oh my God, I got to have Attorney Kamal back. Like, she's amazing at what she does. She knows her stuff. I mean, the way that she communicates is in such a way where anybody can understand, right? We're not using all of this jargon and all of these terms that people can't understand. So I know Attorney Kamal personally. What would you say to real estate brokers in the industry, lenders in the industry, and people that are really helping to shape the future of Chicago and the surrounding suburbs, right? What would you say to us in terms of how we can help to push forward the progress of fair housing beyond Fair Housing Month?
Well, I think Shar said it best a few minutes ago. You just have to keep fighting. You can't let people tell you what you can afford and what you can't afford. If you have done the homework and you've put your finances in place, you should be able to buy wherever you want to, as long as you can afford it. And you just have to keep fighting when they try to deny you those rights.
And part of that fight, I believe, looks like, well, you said depersonalizing may help. I think that's running from the fight.
We don't do that.
I think we need to tell our story. There's power in that story, and the fact that we're not telling it enough and stepping up and stepping forward and sharing the story, there is value in what we bring.
Absolutely.
And while it might, end up with a sale or a higher value, I think it also dilutes what we have. Like, what that story needs to be brought forward. And, as much as I think like the event that we attended at the DeSable Museum was amazing. It had it up on the screen, right? But we had Mr. Williams in the crowd. We have my dad in the crowd. Those stories need to be shared. We have them with us now, and we need to be, bringing their stories forward while they're here and can share it. Like, there was a lot of shame was in the title of the film, but there's a lot of that experience that still drives our elders. And I think that needs to be passed down to realtors who are professions in this industry, who can speak for buyers and sellers who don't understand the history, who don't understand fair housing law, who don't understand when they're presenting that offer, and they're told, or sellers are told, don't be present. Where does that come from? Why shouldn't the seller be present, right?
Yes.
It's because oftentimes there might be an issue with the buyer and the seller not wanting to sell to the other.
Absolutely.
But I've seen some great stories when the buyers and sellers do get to meet each other, right?
Yeah, same
Experience.
Yeah.
But there's something to that I think we need to put a name to and really speak out and bring forward, because we need to get rid of it. And the law itself, it's a step forward, but we really need to get at speaking the truth about it, right? And
Absolutely.
how it comes up in everyday practice for us all as professionals and as buyers and sellers who are experiencing it as they're going through the transactions.
In the film, you were going to say something?
No, I said very important. I mean, she makes a good point about don't fight to depersonalize, fight to have them accept this is my home. Yes, I'm the owner. I know that can be a challenge, but I do agree that perhaps we should think about that in a different way so that we can continue to be present in our homes and help people understand, yes, this home does have the same value and I am the owner.
Exactly. And that was something I was just getting ready to address. Now, in the film that we saw the other night, they talked about how property depreciate when we buy and move in.
Yes.
Well, we've been living in the suburbs since 73. We haven't witnessed that. Everywhere we've gone, there's no depreciation in property anywhere we've gone. Oak Brook, Homewood, Burr Ridge, the property have held its value. So I don't know where they get that from. When we move, it goes down. No, that's not true all the time. Maybe sometime, but not all the time. Yeah.
And I would be remiss if I did not mention what we're talking about as we continue to preface this documentary, which is Shame of Chicago, Shame of the Nation. It's a 4-part documentary, and it really highlights the stories of how Chicago was really the blueprint of how the other urban communities around the country were motivated by the same tactics, segregation tactics, and all of the other redlining tactics, blockbusting, how we served as the Mecca for helping other communities outside of Illinois understand, oh, this is how you keep people segregated. Oh, so these are the policies that we want to use. I mean, I'm not going to spoil it by telling what we saw in that series, but what I will tell people is don't just talk about Fair Housing Month during the month of April. Like, Chicago is still one of the most heavily segregated cities in the nation. We have so much work to do. These conversations have to keep happening. We really have to hold one another accountable. I mean, one of the other things that I feel like we don't understand is the undertone, right? The comments that are made when we talk about certain communities, and people tell me, oh, I don't necessarily want to move into that community. And my role is to make sure that my clients understand, or, for me to be obedient to my clients. But I always say, well, is there something specific about that community? Or, are you looking for special amenities? Like, what is it that you're looking for? And I feel like real estate agents, we still hold a lot of weight as it relates to how people view these communities. And so it's so important that we understand the south side of Chicago didn't get here on its own. The west side of Chicago, that didn't happen by happenstance. Having multiple families live in areas where now the schools there are more students than there are teachers in the classroom. There are more people that need healthcare than there are healthcare facilities. I mean, these things did not happen by happenstance. This was a formula that was created to make sure that we had to really fight for our lives to even survive. So Shame of Chicago, Shame of the Nation. I encourage everybody to watch that. That's airing on WTTW. The first the first part of the 4-part series actually aired last night on WTTW, but you can still go back, catch yourselves up. I think during the DuSable premiere, shouts out to DuSable Museum for allowing us to host in their space. Shouts out to the Chicago Association of Realtors, my local association, and our CEO, Michelle Mills Clement, who is the first African-American CEO of the Chicago Association of Realtors. So while there is a lot of shame of Chicago, there is a lot of pride and there is a lot of progress, and we are breaking those barriers. What would you all say in closing to anyone that will have the blessing of seeing this recording? I'm so glad that we were able to do this today.
Remember that we are professionals for a reason, right?
Yes.
We have the experience, we have the know-how, we have the knowledge. Make use of us, right? And it's our job, if you're aligned with the right professional, to guide you and make sure you have the right resources and tools to be able to find the home, buy the home that you want, and have proper representation. So if something like this comes up, you're prepared to fight, right? You're prepared to fight for what it is that you know you deserve, right? So I would say just to recognize the importance of having good counsel. And yeah, know your worth, right? Know your worth.
Yeah, I just like to say that they should be aware at all time that they can make it happen. If they see something they want and have prepared themselves to get it, they can make it happen. Yeah.
I love it. Now, Attorney Kamal, I wouldn't be me if I didn't allow you to share your contact information. How do people get in touch with you? Yes, we're talking about fair housing, and Attorney Kamal is one of those attorneys that gets the job done here in Chicago and beyond Chicago. So I want you to take a moment to share how people can get in contact with you if they have questions about obtaining your legal counsel, if they'd love to have your services. How do we contact you?
Or you can always call Miss Cass, or you can reach me at sharakamal.com, SHARAKAMAL.com.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. I'm sure that when people see this, you probably are going to get contacted. They're going to probably want Dad to come speak a little more. Yes, I think that we need to continue to have these conversations. The other person that you mentioned was Frank Williams, who was in the building during this premiere. And Frank Williams, if we don't know who he is, he was one of the pioneers for the real estate industry, in my opinion, here in Chicago, moving and doing business in a community that wasn't so welcoming at that time, which resulted in his house being bombed several times, during the early 70s. I'm going to share that information during the premiere of this video. I will share some additional informational links. I want to share the link to the article because even though Dad's talking about this and he's laid back, Dad is a warrior. Dad got that settlement and Dad got that respect. They had to put some respect on his name. And I know that you still had to fight so many years after that, but I'm just looking at all of the positive things that came out of that fight. You're here. Your daughter was inspired. She's continuing to inspire and help homeowners and sellers, and she's building the village to really help continue to push forward with fair housing and making sure that we get whatever we feel like we deserve without someone telling us otherwise. So thank you all so much for joining me today. Thank you for being so flexible. I know we've tried to do this a few different times and my schedule was like a little all over the place, but I really, really sincerely thank you all. Dad, I feel like I know you. I've seen you in person. Look, we're family now. You can't get rid of me.
Absolutely.
Can't get rid of me. My dad is gone. He left us in 2013. He actually was one of the first Black officers that worked over in the Department of Corrections over on 26th in California. So our bloodline, we're fighters too over here. So
I'm sorry about that.
I love it. I love it. Thank you all so much. Again, This is your girl, Miss Cass, with the Aspire Group powered by Exit Strategy Realty. Listen, fair housing is here, but it doesn't have to stop after the month of April. I encourage the communities, lenders, community stakeholders, get in the room, have the conversations. What can we do to really push fair housing within our communities? We are still fighting. Don't think that it's over, because we're still in the fight. So if you are ready to jump into this fight, I want you to text Miss Cass to 85377. That's MSCASS to 85377. If you are thinking of going into ownership at any point, or you're thinking that you just want to know a little bit more about how to go about that, let me and attorney Kamal walk you through that process. You can text Miss Cass to 85377. And you can also just sit down and have a conversation with me, right? Same way you can reach out to me. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great one. Thank you both for being here today. You're awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Dad.
All right. Bye now.
Have a good one. Bye.